Thank you for joining me. Here we are, it's week 3 of your management principles module. And I want to talk to you as scheduled this week about managers and who they are as people and how that impacts the way they manage and the success they have as managers. The point is this: when I go to work, I don't leave who I am behind at home. I am that person, and that person, me, has thoughts and feelings and attitudes and values and emotions, and all of those things will impact on my interaction with people. Not only is it going to impact, it's going to determine to a large extent whether my interaction is going to be successful or not in terms of my leadership actions. So we have to keep in mind at all times that what we're trying to do is be better managers and achieve success in what we do. So the learning objectives that I place before you are drawn from your text and are in your lesson plan on the learning management system, Moodle, Learn 2024. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 learning objectives. As I say, they are reproduced on the Moodle page. You probably don't have to pause the video to write these things down. But critically, looking at number 1 over here, the important thing for us to do is to say, what is personality? And personality is simply how people feel, think, and act. That is the nature of personality. It's the distinguishing characteristic of me compared to you, compared to someone else. And while there are overlaps, we tend to be fairly unique. However, we also tend to behave in similar patterns, and it's important for us to recognize what those patterns might be in terms of management styles. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and that's something for another lesson. Right now, I'm simply going to say that those resources that we manage as managers are something that I've exposed you to. So as long as you remember what we're talking about here, we can move on and say, here's another 5 thing. It's the big 5 personality traits model. And we know that we fit onto dimensions. Some of us are terribly neurotic, and some of us aren't neurotic at all. When you are neurotic, you tend to be you tend to feel differently to other people. When you have a conscientiousness which is very great, then you are going to be a perfectionist. At the opposite end of the conscientiousness scale is someone who is rather rash. On the agreeableness scale, you have someone who's really unpleasant to work with because they really are manipulative and deceitful. But on that same scale, people can be absolutely selfless, sometimes even gullible and submissive. So familiarize yourself with this because it's very interesting stuff, and know that a brash person in one situation might in fact manage another situation which requires more caring and more feeling badly. So managers are cut out for some things better than they are for others. And whether we regard managers as plucking or deciding and gathering and disseminating information or interacting with people, it's in this role of interaction, leadership, where relationships are made or broken. So extroversion is one's level of outward optimism, and extrovert people tend to have great friendly dispositions. The negative affectivity, on the other hand, is someone who is more prone to be critical of both of themselves and other people, and expect and anticipate that there might be some sort of failure on the horizon. Agreeableness and conscientiousness are, as you saw in the schematic on this slide deck from 4 or 5 slides ago, the agreeableness is a dimension which means that on the one end of it, it's going to be different to the other end. That's what we mean by dimensions. And on the one end of agreeableness, you can have someone who's just too gullible, we said. And on the other hand, you can have someone who's just too manipulative. So the balance over here is what is desirable. And I think for anyone who wishes to be an, a successful manager, an effective manager, they would think about how they need to change their personality in order to become a more successful manager. We talk about openness to experience, and I allow you to reflect over here on openness and the nature of someone's interests and whether they're broad or narrowly defined. I'm going to move on from this slide, but you can pause it at your leisure and make a note of what is written there for you. Here's the thing. What's interesting for me in the years that I've spent working in business and guiding people and being guided by others is that managers have all sorts of different types of personalities, and there isn't one best type. But we do know that excessive neuroticism and too much disagreeableness is not going to serve group interests or individual interests particularly well. And that is something which manifests as a management style. Some people are very oriented towards getting the job done, and other people are oriented towards keeping people happy. I think that as a younger man, I was probably more concerned about keeping people happy and content. And as I grew older, I realized I had to emphasize at the same time the fact that the job had to get done, because the job just has to get done. Now, if there are these distinctions, it is the case also that as followers, we tend to read our boss. And when we read our boss, if we read them effectively, we can interact more favorably because we realize that their bad moods might just be a factor of their personality, a function of their personality, and not necessarily directed at us as critical emotion. But there is something else I want to introduce you to. Never mind the big 5 personality traits. Can we move on? You've got your notes. You understand that we're at the end of this thing here. I want to introduce you to a thing we call locus of control. And locus of control is about whether we see ourselves as influencers and influential, or whether we believe we are influenced by people who are more influential than us. In other words, are we controlling our lives, or are our lives being controlled for us? Julian Rotter is like the man over here himself, all right? And he introduced this theory to us. I have a photo for him in a short while. But the big thing, I think, is for you to figure out what your locus of control is, and to assess yourself, because it has an impact on how you perform. You see, if you feel that you control your life, that you have an internal center of control, then you tend to perform better than someone who believes that they are a victim of circumstance. It just is so. And I really do recommend that you spend some time pursuing this, because it is fascinating to understand how this might in fact influence your life. Certainly as a teacher, and as a teacher for several decades now, I observe the locus of control in students, because it manifests as excuses. And if you have an external locus of control, you figure that your success is in fact my problem. And someone with an internal locus of control recognizes that they have agency, they can make choices, and that they're responsible for their well-being and how well they learn. It's not the teacher which is going to be the biggest impact on whether you learn well or not. It's going to be you. So that's one example. The as we get through to assessments, we tend to see the impact of this. But there are, hmm, but that's not where the story ends, because there are other factors which impact or affect managerial behavior. And one of those is self-esteem. And self-esteem is about how we feel about ourselves. It's regarded that a manager who is being the boss of other people and who is responsible for their well-being and their performance should probably feel good about themselves, because otherwise they're not going to be able to motivate or stimulate the people that they're supposed to be motivating and stimulating and guiding. The the calamity with people who have poor opinions of themselves and their abilities would they feel very insecure, and they come across as insecure people, and that's not good for them or good for the people they're supposed to be leading. Then I introduce you to the notion of need for achievement. There was a psychologist, you'll read about it in your text or on Google, David McClelland, and David McClelland looked at managers and people's needs, for that matter, needs for achievement and affiliation or connection, and need for power. So the need for achievement that you might have um, is simply just the extent to which you set a standard of excellence for yourself, and then you set out to achieve it. Your need for power um, is just the degree of influence that you want over other people's lives, really. The affiliation thing, that's interesting. We're saying that if you are worried about fitting in, then you're probably not going to be a good manager, because a manager is not about fitting in. A manager is about making sure that things work. So where does one's priorities lie? That is something you need to pursue in your text as well, I believe. The the exercise with power is something we should probably distinguish between lower level managers and senior managers, though, because senior managers um, have to, in fact, exert power, whereas lower level managers don't need to. But I'm thinking that this is, in fact, a good time to pause and 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 perhaps we should regroup in part two of this three-part lesson. It sound good to you? Sounds good to me.